So for me, this is a great opportunity for Erlang. We've gotten to know the folks at Erlang very well, and it's fun to be here. The idea I had, I'm on the business side, I'm not an engineer. I don't write code, but I do know how to start up a company, and I got it going on my own. I found a company that I could partner with and use their widget technology, and I worked with that and made my business work, and I proved that I had a business, and I knew I had a vision that was real, and I saw a big opportunity, and I built a team, and I hired a team, and made some money, generated profit in the first year and a half, enough to convince me that I had a real business around sports and the ability to scale sports technology, which is fast moving right now. Finally, technology is hitting sports, and I was focused on the athlete, and the athlete has big fan bases, and I was really trying to find a way to make athletes, fans, and dollars flow together. So I started that, hired a couple people, and I got the spinning wheel of death. It didn't work. And I raised some money. It's a very embarrassing thing to do, to go to investors and talk about, oh, it's going to work soon, and it's this idea, and there's this layer that goes through down here, and I have a CTO who was from Google. He's a Googler, and he spent some time at Nike, and he's just got this thing, and it just doesn't work. Let him go, and I met Noah in that process. I met Noah, and Noah comes to me, and he says, Noah is probably one of the most competitive people I've ever met in my life. And he is an athlete, and he just wants to win. And he says, listen, here's what we're going to do. We're going to use Erlang, and we're going to build a world-class company, and we're going to focus on sports. We're going to be an enterprise solution for the vertical of sports, and this is what we're going to do. I said, great. Okay, let's do it. And I was actually able to sort of migrate the business from what I had started, which was really nothing much, but I got advertisers to pay me. I got athletes. I had partnerships with traditional sports publishers, and I was able to make a living and turn profit. But I had a bigger vision. I wanted to build the social network for sports around the world, and I wanted to be the enterprise solution for sports around the world. That was my vision. I don't write code. I don't know how to do that. But I have the business. I have the connections. We have a couple thousand athletes on our platform now. We have teams and leagues. Noah comes to me. He's with me for about 24 hours, and I'll never forget. I was on the golf course in New York, playing in a Major League Baseball tournament thing, and it's about 105 degrees, and I had a friend who was helping me transition, who was also a technologist, and he was helping me transition from what I had in firing the CTO to Noah. He actually helped me meet Noah, and Noah comes to me and says, that guy doesn't know what he's doing, and 24 hours I think he'd been with me. He says, I got to take everything you've done for the last 9 months and throw it in the trash can. So I've raised money, have investors, and he goes, and we're going to use Erlang, and we're going to build a big global business that can handle everything you want to do, but I got to throw everything away. And that was how I got introduced to Erlang. And it was really scary. And I'll never forget this. I'm on I don't play a lot of golf. I haven't played golf in probably years. I was in a place, I have athlete connections, I have professional athlete connections in teams and leagues, and that's what I do. And I was there, and it was 110 degrees, and I'm on the golf course, and I have Noah this year, and I'm like, hold on a second. I have this other guy who's my friend who I trust, and he's not the skill of Noah, and he says, look, you got to make a call. And he goes, but you're betting the company on this. And it was a really interesting thing, because I had a couple of seconds, really, because Noah had brought a team over from where he's coming from, 4 of them, knew Erlang, they were going to do it, and it felt right. He said he made a very, very impressive pitch for the fact that Erlang can do this, and here we are. So today we have approximately 3,000 professional athletes on our platform. We have some very high-profile athletes on our platform around the world: soccer, football, baseball, track, auto racing, Olympians. really, really amazing international people, and the platform works. So for me, as a non-technical person, as a CEO who is very good at raising money and getting the business side of things put together, and really wanting it to work, I don't have the spinning wheel of death. You know, that for me is really what happened with us, and we're in a really good place. So I'll turn it over to Noah at this point.
Sure. So I'll kind of. How about now? Good? Okay. So one of the things that's kind of fun about when people talk about software languages is I've been doing this now for a while. So probably writing software for close to 15 years. And it's kind of fun because people talk about like academically something that works, or in my company, in a 8,000 person startup or 8,000 person company, in this one part of the company, I did this one thing. Like this story that I'm about to tell is actually we bet the whole company on Erlang in San Francisco. So I don't know how many people did that, but we did, and we're live. So here's the story. Using Erlang at a San Francisco startup from day one. So as Brian mentioned, we had an unsuccessful prototype, and the fun part for me, and maybe I'm a little, I like to stir things up with people a little bit, is I was told by someone, you're not going to use Erlang. The reason why people use Erlang is all developers want to use exotic languages. Like that's why you want to use Erlang. So you're not going to do that. And the existing developers, before I even started, said, nah, don't use Erlang. So that's kind of like how I started. And once we got past all that, the next part was, how do we actually do this? And what was interesting is that there was just me and these 3 new developers, and so what we started at was that let's do the backend in Erlang, because we know Erlang scales, and let's do the mobile in C#, which was, we had a really good C# guy, and Xamarin was also a very risky choice at the time, and let's do Android and iOS with Xamarin, and then we'll do the front end and backbone. So we'll just hit single page app, and we'll talk to basically REST APIs. One of the things that actually happened really early, and this is not going to be a Erlang's awesome talk. This is going to be like a real talk, and I like Erlang, but it's going to be like a real story. So we used MySQL because AWS didn't actually support Postgres at the time. And Postgres and Erlang, I think, have a very good story, but MySQL and Erlang is very bad. And the .NET developer just said, no. Like, and he just deleted all the, he still to this day, he doesn't admit it, but he actually wrote a parallel system that had a SQL server running. And then the reason I know is that we were getting tracebacks one day in dev, and it was like .NET tracebacks, and I was like, wait a second, what's going on here? And then, so he knew that this was a failed option, and he actually rewritten it. And anyway, he made a very clear decision that like, we're not going to make it. MySQL in Erlang is not going to work. So we kept the feed and a lot of the search engine in Erlang, but the .NET guy, who's a high performer, just said, I don't think so. 3 months in, I think we did a heroic job. We built an iOS app, a backend in C# and Erlang. We had this lightweight fantasy app. So I was like, okay, I probably still have my job. Brian probably still trusts me. and we built this core deployment system as well. That's a lot of what I was writing was like systems automation scripts. And then about 9 months in, then the next thing was, okay, now we got to build a social network. So the feed and data collection has been mostly in Erlang. And that story behind React and REST APIs that talk to JSON and exchange between other systems, it really has worked very well for us. And then at the same time, in this 9 months process, we started to get really big athletes using Score. Like, I mean, really big athletes. So about a year in, one of the things that I started to work on is like, okay, now I got to shift hats. I've tried to write code in every single language. We have like about 8 or 9 since I've been here. So a CTO is like, I got to write every language. So I wrote R for a while, and I wrote this machine learning system that predicted which athletes we could pick. And as you can see, this is like the fancy R stuff. Is that this is the actual page views right here. So we have exponential growth, and then this is what I predicted that would happen based on our machine learning algorithms. And there's like, yes, we have exponential growth. We're going to win. So that was really exciting about a year ago that we had that. And then about a year and a half in, we got Android released, app release. We started to get really huge international growth. So one of the things that we did at Score that was what was an interesting move from the business perspective is that we started to get UFC athletes. And I don't know how many people know about mixed martial arts, but mixed martial arts are really interesting if you're a programmer because it's a lot like writing code where like thousands of years ago there was judo, jiu-jitsu, and there's like years and years and years. I mean, it's like a lot like how programming language developed, and then they came up with I think it was the 90s, this contest that said, okay, let's just see what style is the best, and then the UFC is really an outcome of people deciding which fighting style is the best. And so it's kind of funny that it's really similar to like, you know, the ecosystem of San Francisco startups. And if you're into the UFC, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is one of the specialties inside that's a big deal. And Brazil has been a huge traffic source for us internationally. So we're a year and a half in, and we're getting massive international growth. We've released the Android app. And so now we still have this exponential growth, which is really exciting. We actually plan on reaching 1 billion people on Earth. We think we can own the sports vertical inside of social networks. And we have some of the biggest athletes in sports join every day. I'm a little less in the know on this, but I know David Luiz, who was on the Brazilian national team in the World Cup, he's on Score. He's got 40 million followers. We have Rob Gronkowski, who's a really big deal in the NFL. John Jones is the #1 pound-for-pound fighter. He's a light heavyweight guy in the UFC. I don't know. Brian probably knows, like, Dale, you know, there's a lot of people. I don't want to say all the names. There are a lot of people are in the queue right now. And we also have 3 full-time Erlang developers and a couple part-time. I try to write Erlang all the time. I've written some fun stuff in Erlang. And so now I'm going to kind of talk a little bit about our ecosystem. So that was like the story of like where we got to today. So as I was mentioning before, I've actually written languages. I've written everything in every one of these languages except for Swift. I haven't done that yet. But Erlang, C#, Python, Ruby, R, JavaScript, SQL, every one of those has actually been something we had to use. So I think that might be an interesting story for adoption at a company is like if you are humble and you say that Erlang has to be a polyglot solution, like there's certain things that's really good at, like high availability and talking to JSON-based APIs, like or you know, protocol buffers, like something like, but not doing things that other languages do better, like talking to relational databases. I mean, that might be a story. I don't know. I mean, people here may know more than I do. This is just 2 years of real-world experience, but these are kind of some of the things that we did. And so here's actually what I learned from a manager is that, and I think I haven't heard this a lot from Erlang, is that I learned that if you're a new developer, it can be very difficult because the tooling is pretty bad for Erlang in comparison to other languages. If you look at Microsoft, no, they're a giant company. But if you look at, let's say, the object relational mappers they have and Visual Studio and SQL Server, and you look at the support compared to Erlang, it's not even close. So I think you have to you have to have a story for that if you're going to adopt Erlang at a company. And you know, we're about making money. We're not about adopting Erlang. So you know, that's part of the story too. The other one I think that's interesting is that I've heard this a lot. Is that, like, you know, which is an interesting argument, is like functional programming is like so exotic, and I actually don't agree at all. I think I can't think of a more logical way to write software than you write this function, it takes arguments and it passes back values. I mean, that seems, and inside of it doesn't do weird stuff, and there's no like changes of state. I mean, that's very logical to me. I don't think that's hard to explain to people. And the whole, like, the reason why people don't adopt Erlang is it's functional programming. I just say, bullshit. I think that's not the reason, in my opinion, just my opinion. And so, and that hasn't been my opinion with people that have adopted Erlang in our company. But one of the things I did notice was that there are people that just wouldn't pick up Erlang, and they just and I think that there should be a much more aggressive onboarding process. If you are like, I mean, I don't know how many other startups actually did Erlang day one. There's probably some, other than us, like, I don't know, 3 or 4 other. But you have to be very aggressive about this, very aggressive, because the tooling is not the same. And if you don't have a story for that, people are not going to adopt Erlang. So this is kind of my philosophy, is that the Navy SEAL philosophy is that you can't leave bodies behind. So you want Erlang to come to your company. You cannot accept there's a dead body that's left in a field of combat. You just can't do that. So you just don't accept the fact that someone doesn't pick up Erlang. Like, if you're a developer, it's very easy to say, oh, well, you're just not as smart as me, or, you know, it's functional programming, you don't get it. You know, that I think is really, really bad, and I think it's going to stop adoption of a language like Erlang. Other thing I think that I've really noticed is that there isn't this soup to nuts success story for, like, actually real world production deployment in Erlang. So, you know, there's lots of books like you know, like some of the books online about learning Erlang, or you look at Cowboy's documentation about running REST service. But then there's like, okay, so you're in a company and you're going to get fired in a month because you work at Netflix if you don't do something and push it to production. So how do you do that? Where's the chef recipe? So it doesn't matter that it's not in Erlang, but where's the chef recipe that pushes it to production? Like, the whole deal, like every single aspect of you come in and you run a REST service that returns back JSON, and it's, you know, here's the status codes, and then you have a chef recipe that deploys it to AWS, or here's how you deploy it to Docker, or here's how you deploy it to you know, Azure. Like that, I mean, maybe someone else knows this, but where this exists, I don't know where it exists. We had to figure this out ourselves. And then the other thing too is that really the people that are going to learn Erlang, I mean, there's not a lot of people that know Erlang in San Francisco, are probably going to be Rails developers or Node developers or Django developers. And so if your solution is a lot harder than what they're currently using, they might just say, no thanks. And they may not, you may not adopt it they may not adopt it at your company. So, and this is one of the things that I wanted to just not talk about problems. I wanted to give some solutions. This isn't completely finished because there's some stuff in there I want to clean up. But we wrote our own continuous deployment process, like me and Kyle and some other people, and we're open sourcing it. So we'll show how we do, how our chef recipes work. We have some automation code with Bodo that talks to OpsWorks, and we're going to open source all this because I don't want to just make a bunch of complaints and then have no solution. So I just have to clean it up because it would be irresponsible for me to release stuff that has things in it that need to get cleaned up. But we're gonna actually give an example of how that would work. So here's a little bit of the example that I had to kind of figure out myself, is that what happens is that GitHub is listening. Basically, Jenkins is listening to GitHub, and in the dev branch or the staging branch or the production branch, it notifies Jenkins that something's changed. Jenkins builds the job. And again, maybe this documentation exists somewhere, but I had to figure this out myself. It notifies Jenkins to build the job. What happens is that two things occur during the job build. One is that Amazon S3 pushes the tar file to, Jenkins pushes the file to Amazon S3, and that's actually the release for that environment. And then, I don't know how many people are familiar with OpsWorks, which is a layer on top of AWS that's Chef, essentially. So Chef, then the life cycles of Chef, and this is the deploy life cycle, is called via an API call by Jenkins, and then the recipes run. The recipe, what it does is it goes into S3, and it pulls down this tar file, and then it runs the Chef recipe, then runs the release process. And so this is kind of what we figured out. You know, there's some really fancy things that I would love. I know there's people that have been programming in Erlang way longer than I've only 5 years or so, that probably know how to do like automatic continuous deployment, hot deploys, and like all kinds of really fancy stuff. But this is how we did it, and the thing I'm going to open source will show actually how it works. Let's see here. So this is something that I've, said a lot to people, is that with Erlang adoption is that being right or increasing adaptation, you can't do both. So a lot of really smart people I work with, this is what I say to them. They'll be like, oh, this guy, he doesn't understand, and blah, 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 blah. And I always say, like, well, do you want to be right or do you want the best solution? Because you're not going to get both. You can't be technically right and get the best solution. They're not possible. They're actually directly in conflict. And so here's, I think, the deal, the real honest truth is Erlang is not the best solution for everything. And I think really for adoption to spread through San Francisco and the world, I think let's just be honest that there's other languages that are way better. I mean, if I'd say relational database story, I think I could be totally wrong, but I don't think so. I don't think that relational databases in Erlang are what it's good at. And the other thing too is that there's been and I don't know, I haven't followed a lot of this, but there's this kind of like academic argument that the purity of functional languages or concurrency, that's why you should use Erlang. Like people don't care. No one cares. No one that makes money cares. No one that has to talk to an investor every day and say, why aren't you making money, cares about this. No one. But if you can make money using Erlang, that's what people care about. So I think that's another argument that I've heard that would be great to kind of take more seriously. And also the onboarding process from other languages isn't taken seriously enough. This is another one that I've just kind of observed. It's like, oh, well, if you're so smart and you went to Stanford and you got a computer science degree, you should just understand how this works, or or whatever the answer, whatever your argument is that I don't think that actually is the right answer. I think you have to go Navy SEAL style, where you say, if you're getting people to learn Erlang, you have to say, I'm not going to let them fail. They're from some other language, and there's no way they're going to fail learning Erlang. I'll do whatever it takes. I'll sit next to them 12 hours a day. I'll follow them home to their house. I will make sure they learn Erlang. And that's a way better way of thinking of like, well, they'll come to me and then they'll talk to me about, they should ask me questions about how Erlang works. Like, no, that's how you will never get adoption. There's some real problems with some of the tool chains, but there's some things that Erlang is awesome at. But you have to be really aggressive about that. The other one too, I think, is that, and hopefully I help solve this because I'm complaining about it, is that the documentation about deploying to production, it just really isn't there. And I think it is a very huge problem. And I would love to, there's people that are way better than this than I am. And I would love to see like a hot deploy documentation and like a GitHub example of like how that works and all kinds of really fancy Erlang stuff. Like I just don't know where it is. I mean, and it's possible it exists. I just don't know where it is. And so that's kind of that's my really honest feedback of 2 years of Erlang. And you can see we're putting our money where our mouth is. we bet the farm on Erlang, and we're doing very well. But it was not like it's not a slam dunk. Erlang is not a slam dunk, and I think that's the thing with any language. You can't just say, oh, it's beautiful, like everything will be perfect. No, it's not going to be perfect. Does it solve some problems that are really hard and it's really good? Yes. And I think it's but you have to earn it. You have to kind of earn the things that Erlang is really good at. So, I'm open for questions. Yep.
I heard that WhatsApp had to make some modifications to Erlang for their system. Did you guys have to do any such things?
I don't know if we're at that level of engineering yet. To be honest, I know that I know Kyle has done some stuff with React, and he's done some things on that level. But I don't know if we're at that. We're about 30 people. I don't know if we have the skill yet. I mean, I think I would like to know I would like to be at the level where I would be good enough to make modifications to Erlang. I don't think we're there yet.
What was maybe the biggest stumbling block that you encountered?
I think it's just when it's kind of funny. Like I learned Python in 2000, and it was kind of a fun thing. Like probably how a lot of people at this conference are. They're like, oh, Erlang is awesome, and it's cool. But then there's like this other part, which is like, okay, there's people that have millions of dollars invested in your company, and can you make it work? And the part that's the stumbling block, I think, is the tool chain. And I think it's less of like the Erlang's bad or Erlang's good, or it's it's now in the spotlight. It's going to take a while for everything to come up to the same level of tooling that C# has, that Node has, that Python has, that Ruby has. And I think it's the lack of like instrumentation. Like New Relic, for example, works with Python and Ruby and these Node and C#, but doesn't work with Erlang yet. And I think once you get that stuff solved, where it's like a no-brainer to all the things that you normally do work really well with Erlang. And I think it's happening, but I think that's a little bit of it. That's going to be a stumbling block for people.
You spoke about protocol buffers.
Yep.
I believe you have a mobile application deployment as well.
Yes.
iOS.
Yes.
Can you just elaborate on that? How's your experience been with Erlang and protocol?
It's been really good. We use protocol buffers everywhere, and probably we've really had no problems with it. I actually, maybe Kyle has even more experience than I know. I know from a superficial level. I mean, what do you think?
Well, the biggest place we use it is just talking to React, and it's basically just built into their React Erlang client. Yeah.
So yeah, we've actually been.
You use JSON with the mobile clients?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think the problem with protocol buffers, it's a trade-off. Like protocol buffers, a cool thing is that you get this this speed, right, of interacting with API, but then it's harder to debug. That's nothing to do with Erlang though. But
The new project we're working on in mobile is probably going to try to use protocol buffers. We're playing with it.
When you start the story, you bet the farm, you bet your career on Erlang. What is it about it that you felt gave you a competitive advantage?
Well, there's a couple things. That's a good question. I didn't put this in there. One is that I think you can get better people at your company if you take a riskier bet. I mean, there's so many startups in San Francisco, and if you are using Erlang or, I don't know, Go or Haskell, I think you're going to attract a self-selecting crew of people, and I think that's been really helpful to us. So I should have actually put that in there, but I think that's actually a huge part of the story is if you're using Rails, I mean, it's kind of like, I don't know. I don't know if you're going to get the same caliber developer as you would get an Erlang developer. Back in 2000, if you're using Python, I think it's a trick to get the best developer at your company. So I think that's maybe one of the biggest things.
I don't know if you were at the one of the Inacas.
I wanted to see that talk, but I didn't have a chance.
Of having said that, when you go out there to reach out to engineers or developers, and then you say, okay, this is what we do, and we do it with Erlang, this is what powers our systems, what's their natural response? Do they even know what that is? Have they heard about it? Or they're interested in learning? What is it?
Yeah, I think it's back. It ties into the other question. Is that I think a lot of developers are very interested that are good. Like they're like, oh wow, what's Erlang? And that's very interesting. And I think, but that was kind of what I was getting at, is that if you then destroy that, like we haven't had a 100% success rate with adopting people to Erlang. So it could be the thing that attracts these really good developers, but then do they actually use it? So I think you absolutely can use it as a recruiting tool to your company, but if you think that it's going to happen by itself and it's going to be all like, you know, sunshine and butterflies, you're in for a rude awakening. You have to be very aggressive about making sure they succeed. So, but I think it's, you know, on the other hand, there are people that are just aggressively against Erlang by principle. Like it's like, why would you use this thing? It's, you know, it's so exotic, and the problem it solves is, you know, it's true. It's better at than anyone else, but like it doesn't come up that often. So for us though, what we're doing is we want to actually reach 1 billion people on Earth. We actually think we can do this. And I remember a few years ago I was in New Zealand and I met a guy at Facebook before it was a big deal, and he said, we're going to reach 1 billion people on Earth. And I thought, you're crazy. Like, well, we're crazy. Like, we think we can do this. So we're picking the right language that just handles this. So I think that's a pretty good answer, is that, like, I don't know, do you want to be a billionaire, or do you just want to, like, make a salary? So like, we're picking a language that can do some exotic, you know, things that, I mean, look at some of these other companies, like Machine Zone is blowing it up, right? WhatsApp, you know, hopefully Score is the #3 $1 billion company. So I think that's the answer.
Deployment, you know, being one of your major
Yep.
hurdles, and certainly it's been one of mine as well. What would you say is the biggest problem that you solved in your process of working on how to deploy production Erlang?
You know, I think it's so easy to do the wrong thing, and I have to take this. Like, I have to be really careful, because I don't want to be an asshole to people that are on my team, but I also want to be really rigid and say we have to have very high uptime, and there's best practices and they're not optional. And so once you're at the level we're at now, where there's all these famous people that are using our platform, you have to say it's not optional. You have to do best practices, and that would be a little bit of my critique, is that doing the right thing is a little harder than it should be. And you know, if you're using other languages, there's enough stuff where it's like, okay, I know I should do the right thing. I should do these things to do the deployment, and here's all the different processes. But in Erlang, it's a little too easy to do the wrong thing. And so we fixed it. We have Chef, and we automated it. You saw the diagram, but because we invented this, I mean, we literally just, I mean, I did a lot of this code myself, and I'm the CTO. Kyle helped a lot with it. I mean, I don't know where else it exists. I think that, I mean, maybe the code we release will help. Maybe other people have some ideas, but I think that's the thing, is like you want to make it so easy to do the right thing that the wrong thing is not even an option. Because once you do the wrong thing and you have a developer that's in production and he's like, how about now? How about now? Like you're down a very, very dark road, and it's not good.
What was the throwaway prototype written in, and where did it fail?
It was in Python, actually. So I've written books for O'Reilly on Python. I mean, I like Python. It's a good language for certain things. I mean, people will disagree with me on this, but I don't think you should write big systems in Python. And I just talked to somebody at Uber that told me they have 500 Python developers. I mean, they're a $40 billion company. They can afford it, but I was like, wow, 500 Python developers, really? And I think it's kind of, I would say with Python, with writing certain things, it's really easy to do the right thing. Can you write like incredible Python code? Sure. But is it easy to do the wrong? Is it easy to make the spinning wheel of death in Python? Yeah, it's real easy, real easy.
I'm curious what score is, how it,
Yeah.
how it works.
Yeah. Okay. Well, this is good. Like I'm probably boring now. Let's have Brian talk. Why don't you talk about score?
Sure. Well, thanks for inviting me back up on stage. Stuart, they let the non-technical guy back up. So Score, what is it? It's at the highest level, it's a enterprise solution for sports. I had the idea a few years ago that the world needed a sport-specific social network. Social media is here, it's part of our lives, and just general sock nets that are out there, they're noisy and cluttered, and Facebook's throttling the content, and everyone's throttling. So it's not the true pure thing. So I'm like, okay, this is a no-brainer. Oh, and by the way, LeBron James, who has 24 million fans on Facebook, makes zero. Facebook makes lots of money. So like, well, this is easy. Let's just create an economic model that makes sense for everybody else that's part of the content creation, and of course, right? So that was the idea behind it, and got a lot of traction. And so what we are is we're a social network for sports, but even above that, we're the sort of vertical, because we've built a core social network, but then on the fringe we also have tools that make them smarter and better, and data and analytics, and how do you, like, what are you really worth, and if you're really a high profile professional athlete or an entertainer or a fan, for instance, like what's your value? So we built all that into this ecosystem, and then we, from the business side of things, we go out and we talk to the world of sports, and we say, you're getting ripped off at Facebook. They're just picking your pockets. Now they're filtering your content. Most people don't even know that. And why are you there? And they go, I don't know why I'm there. And I'm just like, okay, well, come to our platform. So that's what we are. We're a social network that is completely dedicated to the sports fan and sports business and teams and leagues and athletes, fans. And it makes a lot of sense because if you think back in the broadcast world, ESPN was founded right under the nose of CBS, NBC, ABC. They all had sports content. Every Saturday you could watch ABC World Sports for an hour, and you had Harlem Globetrotters once a year, and that was your sports content. And ESPN's like, oh, there's more thirst out there than that. So that's where we are on the whole spectrum. The #1 sports network in social media around the world. $1 billion company, billion users. I mean, sport is everywhere. Like cricket, soccer, World Cup, rugby, Olympics. It's a global language, and so we picked a good vertical to be in.
Is that 1 billion potential users or active users?
So not on our network yet. Potential. Yep. We did 20 million. You had 20 million fans in February. As Noah mentioned, I think we kicked the platform live really about 11 months ago. So we're not even at our year anniversary yet in terms of the social network. So, but we're growing very, very rapidly. We have, if you look at the combined social graph of all the fans of the athletes that are part of our network and which are the most active, we have over 125 million cumulative social graph that we're reaching. So point there is that there's a lot of upside in our business and our model, particularly as we start to get leagues, teams, major global events that are using our platform as their primary social network. There's this intersection. What's really interesting about it is that the broadcast world, which is where traditional sports is, they feel like they have to cover sports. And we're partnering with sports and sports constituents. The difference is partly money, but also partly, like really at the DNA and the core of who you are. The editorial world, the broadcast world of sports is all about, if someone gets in trouble or does something stupid, they got to cover it. They can't partner with them. It's conflict of interest. We, on the other hand, we don't cover it. We're partnering with them. They're creating content because we have the tools that we've given them to be able to do that off the field and on the field. So therefore, we're in a partnership with them, which really creates a different relationship. And I would argue that potentially long-term, it's a better and more robust and more profitable relationship than the people that cover them from an editorial standpoint. So we'll see where it all plays out, but we've definitely elbowed our way into the ecosystem of sports and position ourselves to be a part of the ecosystem and you know, should be very successful at it. Yep.
This question is for Noah. Can you elaborate on what parts of your system you use Erlang for, and or other parts? What do you use?
Yeah, it's a good question, and that was kind of my kind of being real to people about in San Francisco, because I think Erlang should be way bigger than it is in San Francisco. Is that let's just be honest about what it's good at, and what it's not. If you're going to write a web service that talks to an API in JSON, I have no idea why you'd use Python or Ruby. I mean, the performance, if you look at Cowboy, it's, I don't know, somebody probably knows the number better than me. Isn't it like 10,000 requests a second or 12,000 requests a second, something like that? Well, higher, 15,000 requests a second. You look and you run a Rails app that talks to a JSON API that's like 100. You know, Python's like 100. I mean, like really? I mean, that alone is like, I mean, come on. So that's the part I think that's like, why in San Francisco are you using Python or Ruby to talk? I mean, it's not harder. I mean, it's really like the coding is very similar. I mean, it's maybe less code. So we're using Erlang for the feed system. So the thing that talks to React and does you know, all of the content that comes back. The user system is all in a relational database, and there's APIs that we talk to. And then obviously mobile, you can't write Erlang in mobile. So
So are you rendering templates on web requests?
no, it was just straight API. This all like deserializing and serializing data and talking to APIs. Erlang is very good and real time, like WebSockets. And the other thing also kind of related to your question is that you know, another thing that I haven't necessarily heard yet is that a lot of people are talking about Node or Python or Ruby, and I've done projects in all those that have event loops. I mean, that to me is just a tragedy. It's a real tragedy that people are writing event loops in Python, Ruby, or Node, because what happens is if you're doing a software as a service, which is the rage now that venture capitalists are investing in, and you're using Python, Ruby, or Node, what's going to happen is that core is going to get hot. And I know Guido's here, and I know Guido, and it's like the GIL, it does magical things. That's great. But if you're writing a software as a service application, it's going to hit one core, and now you're going to have to figure out how to process requests that go to the other cores. And then you're going to pickle, you know, deserialize data and then do multiprocessing and all this stuff. And every language has got their other way of doing it. Or you'll just use Erlang, you'll use RabbitMQ to do all that. But why would you do that? Like, why would you do all that stuff when you could just accept data and then it spills out to all the cores on your machine, all the machines in your network? So that's another thing that, like, every software as a service that collects a fire hose of data, why are you using Ruby or Python or Node? Like, why? And it's just horrible. It's just so horrible. And like, please spread the word. It is so bad, like so bad. Yeah, and Guido's here. We should ask him in like 5 minutes. Why? Why would anyone use that? I hope he just says, like, I don't know, like, yes, you shouldn't use that. Python's better for crunching data or something. But like, you know, so that's my other advice. And that's what, when we collect data and process things, like, Erlang is very good. It's very good at that.
The other thing you might want to mention is the business of our business as it relates to Erlang and communications, and where we see the business going with chat and with.
Yeah, oh yeah, that's the other thing too, is with kind of where we're at from a social network too, is that, I mean, Erlang is so good at high availability and like scalability. And if you look, Machine Zone is awesome, because if you look at what they did, you know, and I talked to the CTO yesterday, it's like, and you see all these, you know, millions of users simultaneously using something. Like, if you, and I think I was talking to you, and you said Erlang's good at making billionaires. Like, yeah, if you want to be a billionaire, I mean, you know, that's a fun problem to solve. Like, go to that. Like, go to like, that's what Erlang is really good at, is You want to build a company that could make billionaires. That's why you use Erlang.
That's all the time we have for questions,
All right.
unfortunately. Thank you guys so much.